What BlackRock is planning with Bitcoin will shock you. What if the biggest financial institution on Earth isn't just investing in Bitcoin, but quietly preparing to control how the entire world interacts with it? Not dominate it in the obvious way, but reshape it from the inside. Because while most people are still arguing about whether Bitcoin is real money, something far bigger is already happening behind the scenes. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. For years, Bitcoin was supposed to be the outsider. A rebellion against Wall Street. A system built to escape institutions like BlackRock. But now, that same institution is stepping directly into the center of the crypto world. So the real question isn't whether Bitcoin will survive. It's this: why is BlackRock so interested in Bitcoin now? What do they see that most people don't? And more importantly, what are they planning to do with it? Because the answer could change not just crypto, but the entire global financial system. To understand what's happening, you have to understand who you're dealing with. BlackRock isn't just another investment firm. It's the largest asset manager on the planet, controlling over $9 trillion in assets. That's more money than the GDP of most countries. At the center of it all is Larry Fink, a man who has spent decades shaping global finance from behind the scenes. For most of Bitcoin's existence, traditional finance ignored it. Then they mocked it. Then they tried to regulate it. And for a long time, BlackRock stayed on the sidelines. But something changed. In recent years, Larry Fink went from skepticism to calling Bitcoin digital gold. That shift wasn't random. It was calculated. Because institutions don't move fast. But when they do move, it's usually because they see something coming. And they want to be early. The first clue lies in something that sounds boring, but isn't. An ETF. Specifically, BlackRock's push for a spot Bitcoin ETF. At first glance, it looks simple. An ETF just makes it easier for investors to buy Bitcoin through traditional markets. But here's where things get interesting. It doesn't just make Bitcoin easier to access. It changes who controls access. Instead of individuals holding their own keys, millions of investors now gain exposure through institutions, through funds, through custodians, through systems that BlackRock understands better than anyone. This is a subtle but powerful shift. Bitcoin was designed to remove middlemen. But ETFs reintroduce them. And not just any middlemen. The biggest ones in the world. But that's only the surface. Because BlackRock isn't just offering access to Bitcoin. They're building infrastructure around it. And that changes everything. BlackRock operates a system called Aladdin. It's one of the most powerful financial platforms in existence. Banks, governments, and institutions rely on it to manage risk and allocate capital. Now imagine Bitcoin being integrated into that system. Not as a fringe asset, but as a core part of global portfolios. Suddenly, Bitcoin isn't outside the system anymore. It becomes part of it. But here's the twist most people miss. When Bitcoin enters that system, it doesn't stay the same. It becomes financialized, packaged, modeled, controlled through layers of abstraction. And that raises a question most people aren't asking. If you don't hold the asset directly, do you really own it? To understand what BlackRock may actually be planning, you have to zoom out. Way out. Think about how financial systems evolve. First, a new asset appears. Then it gains attention. Then institutions step in. Then it becomes part of the system. Gold followed this exact path. At one point, individuals held physical gold. Then came paper claims. Then centralized storage. Then financial products built on top of it. Over time, control shifted away from individuals to institutions. Now look at Bitcoin. It started as peer-to-peer money. No banks. No intermediaries. Just code. But as adoption grows, institutions see opportunity. Not just to invest, but to build products. ETFs. Custody solutions. Derivatives. Portfolio integrations. And once those layers exist, most people won't interact with Bitcoin directly. They'll interact with representations of it. And that's where the real shift happens. Because whoever controls the infrastructure controls the flow of capital. BlackRock isn't trying to replace Bitcoin. They're positioning themselves to sit on top of it, to become the gateway. the bridge between traditional finance and digital assets. And if they succeed, they don't need to own Bitcoin. They just need to control how the world accesses it. But here's where things get even more interesting. This isn't just about profit. It's about influence. If Bitcoin becomes a core global asset, and BlackRock becomes the primary channel through which institutions access it, that's not just financial power. That's systemic power. The kind that shapes markets, policies, even economies. Risk. But this story isn't one-sided. Because there are real risks to what's happening. On one hand, institutional adoption brings legitimacy. It brings liquidity. It brings stability. But on the other hand, it introduces centralization. Bitcoin was built to be decentralized, to remove reliance on powerful entities. But if most Bitcoin exposure flows through institutions, that vision starts to blur. There's also the risk of market influence. Large institutions don't just participate in markets. They move them. If firms like BlackRock accumulate significant exposure, their decisions could impact price, volatility, and sentiment. Then there's regulation. As institutions enter the space, governments follow. Rules increase. Oversight expands. And while that can protect investors, it can also limit the freedom that made Bitcoin unique in the first place. And perhaps the biggest risk of all is psychological. Because when people stop thinking of Bitcoin as something they own, and start thinking of it as something they access through institutions, the entire philosophy behind it begins to shift. From independence to convenience. From control to trust. So, what's really happening here? Is BlackRock taking over Bitcoin? Not exactly. Bitcoin itself doesn't change. The code remains the same. The network continues to run. But the way people interact with it, that's what's changing. And that's where the real story lies. Because revolutions don't always get destroyed. Sometimes, they get absorbed. Integrated. Transformed into something more familiar. More controlled. More predictable. But here's the final question. Does that make Bitcoin stronger? Or does it quietly change what Bitcoin was meant to be? Because in the end, this isn't just about BlackRock or ETFs or institutions. It's about the future of money. And whether that future belongs to individuals or the systems they were trying to escape in the first place. And the answer may already be unfolding right in front of us.